mediator during Susan's 20-year career in fashion. She and her team have designed and sold over $500 million of her products. Susan has been seen on Fox News and on hundreds of television and radio shows, demonstrating the results we can create when we transform the way we think and focus on solutions instead of on problems. Susan offers a 1-hour complimentary telephone session so that everyone can transform their lives and their finances in their future. With that being said, boy, you work miracles, I know. You're still working on me. But now I'd like to let everyone know that tonight, I know that for some people, hating your boss is normal, and for working, let's say, for some of us, walking out on a difficult boss creates financial trouble or even big problems finding the next job. And so tonight's show will explore all your options and how you can prevent and resolve the very common problems. And I can relate to all of these. We have so many wonderful questions for you tonight, Susan, and I'm excited to get started. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
Well, I realize that what are the top 3 reasons people do dislike or even hate their boss?
Wonderful. This is a trick question. It has nothing to do with your boss. Right? So the reason most people hate their boss has nothing to do with the boss. So Fred, if you would put the Herman Brain Dominance map up, that's fantastic, thank you. So the reasons that people hate their bosses, or that you might, are either the A quadrant, the blue quadrant, you don't get enough money. So money is up there. It's a money issue. Or you don't get enough respect. Upper left, blue, is all about money and respect. The other reason is the yellow. Upper right, yellow, the D quadrant. You need freedom. You want freedom. You want to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Well, for you, having a boss in any capacity is a challenge, right? Then the third reason is the red quadrant, the C quadrant, the emotional quadrant. Emotionally, you're not a match, as if that's something that you're looking for or could expect to find, but you're not a match. He doesn't meet these needs of yours, or you don't like the way he looks, or you don't like the way she behaves, or whatever it is. It's an emotional mismatching. And that's it.
Perfectly put. There you go. Those are the facts. Very clear. Thank you, Susan. Well, what about this situation? Can an employee do well in a job if they pretend to like their boss, even when they really don't?
Well, if you are a brilliant Academy Award deserving actor or actress, then you can fool most of the people most of the time. The rest of us can't. The rest of us know when we're around somebody who's very snobby, or we're around somebody who's very arrogant, or we're around somebody who doesn't like us for no reason or a million reasons. We can tell. You just have that radar system. You can tell. So the bottom line is, if you're not the best actor or actress that should have been at the Actors Studio with Marilyn Monroe, if that's not you, please know that you're not likely to be faking it. So don't try.
Yes, so that's the truth. Now, what about this? How about if really ambitious employees have this problem as much as those that, let's say, aren't as ambitious?
No, not at all, because an ambitious person is there for number one. What are you paying me? What kind of job security do I have? What's the next job I want? How am I going to go from this job to the next job? They don't even notice. They don't pay attention. They just want to get to their next destination, which is a better job with a bigger payday. And this is what you have to do. You have to become more like that. If you can become more practical, if you can become an employee who's more focused on your own bottom line, you will be a better employee because you'll be thinking of your boss's bottom line too. So this is not about fake it till you make it. This is about you actually evolving, which if you guys have watched shows with me before that Gigi and I have done, then you know I'm all about teaching you how to evolve and change your brain so that you have more tools and more skills and get better results.
I love that, Susan. Now, how about this question? How dangerous is office gossip?
I would say that the most dangerous thing you can do is gossip at the office. And I say this because one of my friends who's not a client got fired a few months ago because of that. And I knew this was a problem because the same friend was fired from another job about a year and a half ago. And when I discussed it with that friend in the original problem, I said I was nervous when she told me the things she was saying to one of her coworkers. And she told me at the time that it was perfectly safe. It wasn't. So it isn't worth the risk. You know, it just isn't worth the risk.
And that is a very common situation, so it's important to pay attention to it is not worth it.
Right, and remember I said on the show maybe 6 months ago that my mother used to take me out to dinner every week when I had my first couple of jobs, and she would say, okay, you know, tell me all the stuff that you can't stand. Because she knew I was just, you know, exploding. And then she would listen, and she was really good about this. And then she would explain why the boss did this and why the boss didn't do this and all that. And I could go back to work the next day, and I had a much better sense of what was behind the scenes. It's not that I'm telling you to put up with anything from a boss. I'm saying that you have to position yourself practically, you have to position yourself financially, and the smart move is to really understand things from the perspective of your boss. How does your boss see things? When you can do that, you can really do well. And I have a former client whose mom called me and just told me that for the last couple of years, her son, who's a former client, as is she, her son has been getting the award at the company for the best in sales in his department.
Stays focused on
Yeah, this is a guy who used to get fired regularly because he would complain about his boss, he would hate his boss, and then he would also gossip about his boss. And he stopped doing all of that. It's great.
Great story and a wonderful possibility. Well, how about this? Is it possible for us to do our best at a job if you really just do not like your boss?
No, you really can't, because as Gigi was pointing out when we were creating the show, she said it's so exhausting. You know, it's really exhausting to be up in your head, going around and around about how much you hate this guy, and then try to put a good face on it. Instead, if you do what I'm recommending, where you use the 6-part conversation, use the 6-part conversation for sales. Thank you, Fred. You understand why the boss is doing what he's doing. You bring yourself back to peace with self-empathy. You bring the boss back to peace with empathy. You express yourself with self-expression, but you do it in a practical, business-appropriate way. And then you come up with solutions. You're not constantly ready to spring and ready to attack.
Doesn't that sound logical? It really does. How often do, let's say, young people, their first, second, third job, end up hating their boss at least part of the time?
You know, let's face it, when you're young and you just don't have the backstory, you don't understand what's going on, you don't know how difficult it is to produce a product or to manufacture a product or deliver a product or create or design or invent a product. You don't know how difficult it is to make cold calls and warm calls and hot calls and presentations and close deals and get paid. I mean, that's all the things that go into running a company. So if you're young and you're just out of school and this is your first, second, or third job, no boss is going to expect you to know this, but at the same time, they expect you to be gracious about it. It's like if you go to a movie that you don't like, you don't throw rotten tomatoes at the screen because you understand that they've worked really hard to do the best they could. Now, you may not have liked it, you may not go to see other things with these actors or the director, etc. But you know they worked really hard. They put a lot into it, and that's what a company is. It takes a lot to have a company. So I think your boss expects you to at least be gracious about it and respectful.
That respect, how nice. Key word. Now, Susan, would you please demonstrate how to turn that story around about a boss that, let's say, the employee can just develop a better attitude with?
Well, you know, the common thing of somebody who's really young is my boss is an idiot, right? I mean, how many times have you thought that if you're young? How many times have your kids thought that if you're a mom or a dad? My boss is an idiot. So the first thing you have to do is you have to really begin to be practical. So, okay, you shift from that into, my boss shouldn't have XYZ. My boss shouldn't have spoken to me that way yesterday. And maybe now you think you can walk around for the rest of the week or even 2 weeks with a chip on your shoulder. My boss shouldn't have talked to me that way. But the bottom line is, nobody told you you were getting a perfect job, right? Nobody told you you were getting a perfect boss, right? You were looking for a job, you wanted a job, you needed a job, you took the job. Now, instead of my boss shouldn't talk to me that way, isn't it possible to see I should communicate with my boss in a more successful way? Turn the whole thing around. What can I do that's different? My boss talked to me that way because now that I think about it, I didn't get the work in on time, or I showed up to work 15 minutes late, or I didn't give him the message I was supposed to give him, or something else I could have done differently. And if you start thinking, if I do things differently, my boss is going to do things differently, you are going to have a far more successful career, and you'll make a lot more money too.
That's a wonderful way to go about it, absolutely. What you can do to make the difference. So once you do turn that story around, isn't there another one underneath that one waiting to grab you?
Always. And that's the danger. So if this is interesting to you, if you think that this is something you do, send me an email or call me, and I will send you the 4 questions of inquiry and the turnaround. That's the tool that we use here to turn the story around. My boss shouldn't have spoken to me that way. Is it true? What evidence do I have that my boss shouldn't have spoken to me that way? Well, my boss actually speaks to everybody that way. So obviously I have no evidence, right? Or, well, my boss didn't speak to me that way last month when I was excited about my new job. My boss only started speaking to me this way in the last couple of days, ever since I started going out on interviews to get a better job. So the truth is that when I behave differently, my boss will speak to me differently. So if this is interesting, shoot me an email or call me, and I'll send you this exercise. It will get you out of this habit forever, which is huge.
That's a big habit to break. Reprogram that. Well, that's our next question. How can we go about reprogramming ourselves and end that negative storytelling, let's say, forever?
Yeah. And it is all about shifting your focus from them to ourselves. Instead of what they should do, what they shouldn't do, with the 4 questions of inquiry, you're going to start turning around to, they're who they are, it's my job to get more of my needs met. And if you use self-empathy, that's another way to turn this whole thing around. So in self-empathy, it's, I feel angry because I need more respect. But I haven't been able to get my need for respect met. Not that it's everybody else's job. I feel sad because my need for appreciation isn't met most days. Breathe. Again, it's not because he should. It's not because my boss should. It's because I don't have the skills to get that accomplished yet. And when you learn the 6-part conversation, you have those skills. So that's why I teach it.
And that'd be a wonderful self-responsibility to learn that so that they can get along, enjoy what you're doing.
Exactly.
Hopefully even love it. Now, if you really need to keep your job, even if, let's say, you do indeed hate your boss, what else can you do?
Well, the only way that you're going to get the money you need is through your boss. Because, you identified this person as your boss. I didn't say by coming to your office that this is the person you have to suck up to. You said it. That's your boss. Okay. So if this is your boss, there's no way to increased income except through your boss. Even if you know the owner of the company, which have had that situation many times myself, it just isn't safe to try to circumvent the boss. Because the boss is there, the boss has been given permission from the owner to run things. So that's the person you have to get along with. You have to turn your story around, and then you have to shift some of your behaviors.
Once again, a lot of the self-work needs to be done. How do you really go about keep focusing on doing that great job if you really need to enhance your resume?
Well, you have to be very practical. Here's where the rubber meets the road, or it separates the men's from the boys, or whatever expression you want. This is where it's tough. This is where you have to activate your left brain. So Fred, if we could just see that map again, that would be really great. So you've got to be very practical. You've got to look at the parts of the upper left brain, the blue quadrant. You've got to really think about money. And you've got to be very practical and look at the lower left brain, the green quadrant. You've got to think about job security. When you think only about money and you think about only job security, what happens? You treat your boss better. What happens? You keep your job longer. I have worked with so many clients who needed to keep their job, and I showed them how to keep their job, and every one of them kept the job until they were ready to quit. But I've had a lot of friends, like the one I just mentioned, who didn't want to learn any of that, and they lost their jobs. You have the choice.
Before they were ready to lose their job, obviously.
Way before.
Yeah, that's the sad part. So these skills will help you, even if you're lucky enough to love your boss. Have that respect.
Because there's usually somebody at the company that you don't like. You may love your boss, but the other salesperson or the person whose office you have to pass in the morning, somebody. There's somebody, that's maybe harder to deal with.
Oh, that's true. How about that? They're out there. Well, so how can somebody actually develop self-control when it comes to corporate culture and appropriate office behavior?
Well, the first thing is you have to change your brain. It's really true. It's like I got a wonderful, wonderful testimonial from a client today who's working on her resumes with me and working on her career in this program I have called Career Climb. And so she said, when she redid her resume, she said, you are changing my brain, Susan. I am really enjoying this, and I never enjoyed this before. And I'm making her change her resume again and again, and I'm making her look for companies who really have the kind of career path that she would be appropriate for and she would also like. And so it's a lot of new work for her. But she realizes that if she wants more money, and she wants job stability, and she wants financial stability, this is how you get it. So she's biting the bullet, and she's just putting her full attention on how to look at the financial issues, look at the data, look at the facts, look at the numbers, and do things in a step-by-step and consistent way. When you do that, you produce results.
Well, she sounds like she's happy and she will be successful as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a bonus. Could you explain to us how a person can go about managing a boss that you really do hate while you're looking for another job?
Yeah. So the way to motivate and inspire, I'm not saying manipulate, because manipulation, people used to say that my mother was very manipulative. And I used to joke and I would say, if my mother were really manipulative, you wouldn't have even noticed. You would have just been doing that thing she wanted you to do with a smile on your face, because that's what manipulative is. So motivate and inspire. So that, how do you do it? Well, you got to figure out what your boss's needs are, don't you? So if your boss is under a lot of pressure financially, or if your boss is under a lot of pressure to get products shipped to sales, people have ordered them through sales. If your boss is very stressed for any one of a million reasons, meet more of your boss's needs. Your boss will like you better. You'll have job security as long as you do that. And then later you can go get a better job.
I like that. Yep. Learn how to go with it with the right skills. So that's success in itself right there,
right.
regardless of the situation.
And you can do that with anyone and everyone for the rest of your life. So don't learn these skills because of this boss that you don't like. Learn these skills because you want to have a fabulous life. That's the reason. I didn't develop them because of some boss I had in 1978 who I hated and everybody else hated and whose daughter hated him. 20 years after I left that company, and after I learned that they used to have cocktail parties at a local bar in New York with all the former employees, and once there were like 50-something people showed up. But years went by, and I reconnected with a woman I went to high school with. She was 1 year behind me. There were 18 kids in each grade. So, I knew her very well. She was just 1 year, so 19 people away from me, right? That guy was her father. She hated him too. But I don't want to make my life about that. So what I did after I left that company was I signed up for the S training so that nobody would ever push me around again. And then I did, zillions of courses after that and haven't stopped. Because the only reason that people make your life a misery is because you don't have better skills. How's that for the solution?
That's a reality check right there. I would like to explore this. Don't you really have to get along with your boss to get a really good recommendation for your next job?
Yeah, you bet you do. And some people think that because now there are laws against bosses maligning employees and former employees, that you're safe, but you're not. Because if Gigi called me and said, hi, I'm thinking of hiring your your previous employee, Linda, what do you think? Now, if Linda was an amazing employee, I would say, oh, she's fabulous. She did this, this, this. You're going to love her. I was really sorry to lose her, but I know she wanted to move to Chicago. So she's fabulous. I would hire her in a heartbeat. Now, what if this Linda was someone I knew hated me and was a pain to be around? All I would have to do is Gigi would say, well, I'm thinking of hiring your former employee, Linda. And all I'd have to do is go, oh, Linda.
That hesitation.
That's it. Linda's not getting a job from that person, right? Nobody can put that kind of money into hiring and training anymore. The number one most expensive thing in companies today, because I do a lot of business and corporate coaching, is the money it takes to find an employee, which, by the way, I've invented a system that bypasses all that. But find an employee and train that employee. And then let the employee mess up in the early days. So that's too expensive. So they can't take a chance. If they hear anything slightly negative or hear a hesitation, that person is probably not being hired.
That's another reality check right there. I'm glad you pre-prepare people for that. Now, I can see we're out of time. I wonder if you'd be willing to describe what our little video clip is going to be about tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a previous show that Gigi and I did, and the number one component of success is gratitude. So we hope you enjoy it. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Oh my. Okay, this is a tricky one at times, perhaps. How about showing us how to express gratitude to an employee?
So that, that's a little bit like speaking to a child, and a lot of people get confused because they think they just have to tell their employees what to do. They think they just have to tell their children what to do. And in fact, if you really want to keep an employee, you need to be very clear about your requests and just as clear about your appreciation. So if, John just finished a proposal for you, and John had to work late last night or had to work over the weekend, then obviously as a boss, it would be useful to say, John, this is such a great proposal. I love the way it's written. I love the illustrations you've got in there. And the fact that you were willing to work last night, I can imagine you stayed up really late in order to get this to us for 9 o'clock. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I like the clarity of what, in fact, they did do, because then it's very clear. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
Because otherwise, if you say to your child, thank you, and you don't express thanks for the fact that they helped you clear the table and all that, if you express thanks, but you don't clarify that it was finishing the report, the way it was written, the images, the fact that it was on time and all that, then you're not training your employee to be able to meet more of your needs in the future. You're not training your child to be able to meet more of your needs in the future. And with an intimate partner, you're not letting your partner know what works. So even though it's not as clear about training an intimate partner, but still, if you don't let your partner know what meets your needs and what doesn't meet your needs, you know what you're going to get more of, what you don't like.
Very important. Thank you, Susan, for making that clear. I was just trying to give an example there. But Okay, well, let's explore the examples of gratitude. Which part of the 6-part conversation is this?
Oh, well, gratitude self-expression. It's like when you're speaking about your needs, that's part 3, self-expression. And Fred, would you be able to put up the 6th part for just a second? I don't know if you can grab it, but if you can, that would be great. And, you start out with self-empathy, which is silent when you calm yourself down. Then you move on to empathy, which is all about your listener, about your listener's feelings and needs. Once you've completed that, then and only then can you go to your own feelings and needs. In this case, you're not feeling some negative thing because a need wasn't met. You're feeling a positive thing. You're appreciating because your needs were met.